And I'd like to begin today's session by acknowledging the traditional owners of the many lands on which we're meeting today. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. As I said, LGV and Finpro have worked together on developing today's webinar, and I would like to acknowledge and thank Finpro in particular for their efforts in supporting this work and also in supporting the implementation of the Local Government Act 2020. Hopefully many of you will have participated in the Finpro Professional Development Day and AGM that was held last Friday. So you'll already have had an introduction to the 2020-21 model accounts and 2021-22 model budget publications. I am joined today by Martin Thompson, the Senior Partner of Audit and Assurance at Crowe Australasia, and also Hannah White, Management Accounting Coordinator at the Mitchell Shire Council. So Martin and Hannah have been instrumental in the development of the model accounts and model budget respectively this year. And they're going to talk us through the changes to the model accounts and changes to the model budget in some detail. And I would like to welcome them both along to today's session. So hi Martin and hi Hannah. First up, a little bit of housekeeping. So just to let everyone know that today's session will be recorded for the purpose of making it subsequently available to anyone unable to attend today. If I can please ask that everyone keeps their microphones on mute during the session, obviously, unless towards the end you're wishing to ask a question. We've allocated about 1.5 hours for today's session. We haven't run it before, so we'll see how we go. And it's also dependent on, I suppose, whether there are questions that people wish to ask, but we'll certainly keep within that 1.5 hour time parameter. The structure of the session is listed on the slide. So we plan to have Martin talk us through the changes to the model accounts first. Hannah will then talk us through the changes to the model budget. We'll make mention of some other upcoming events. And lastly, we've allocated some time for questions at the end of the session. I would note that there is chat functionality in Zoom. So if you do have questions that come up along the way during the presentations, please feel free to pop your questions into the chat. We'll try and respond to them probably towards the end during the question session, but if you prefer to ask questions that way, then that's fine. Feel free to use that feature. So before I hand over to Martin, just a couple of quick reminders. So on this slide, this is where you can access a copy of the model accounts, the model budget, the better practice guides that go along with those templates, and the detailed summary of changes documents. So if you did want to access those and potentially have them open as we work through some of the changes, that may be useful if you'd like to do that. So feel free to jump onto that web link if you haven't had a chance already to obtain copies of the documents. That's where they and just in terms of the model accounts, I would like to just quickly highlight the legislative and regulatory requirements because I think it's important to mention this as we're in a sort of transitional period between the, I guess, the 1989 Act and the 2020 Act. So you can see up there on the slide just a bit of a summary of the Local Government Act 2020, that it received royal assent 24th of March 2020. It's being proclaimed in stages. Part 4 addresses the planning and financial management aspects and became operative on 24th of October 2020. But importantly, the 2020 Act includes some transitional provisions in section 329(7) particularly. The key aspect of the transitional provisions is that it means that the annual report that Council prepares for the 2020-21 year effectively is still prepared under the 1989 Act and the 2014 regulations. So this is part of the transitional provisions in the new Act. I mention it here because we'll be talking today about model accounts. So the model accounts is effectively still under the old legislation and the old regulations. We'll also talk about the model budget, which is, because it's forward-looking, effectively under the 2020 Act and the 2020 regulations. So just to let you know, that's also why you'll continue to see some old references throughout the model accounts and the better practice guide. So I just wanted to put that disclaimer up front for people. All right, that's enough from me. So I'm going to hand over to Martin Thompson. He's going to take us through the detail of the changes to this year's model accounts and better practice guide. So I'd like to welcome Martin along, and I'll pass over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'll just...
I'll stop sharing.
Yep, thank you. Okay. Just get my screen up. What have I done? I'm not in presentation mode. Okay, so there we go. Hopefully you can see my screen now, and we've got the technology working well. If not, I'm sure someone will let me know quite shortly.
Yep. Looking good, Martin.
Thank you, Daniel. I think the first thing to note today is that in terms of the model accounts, we've tried to keep the changes pretty limited this year. We recognise that there was substantial changes last year with the leases and the income standards that we needed to work our way through. So this year we've taken a step back and tried to reduce the number of changes to the bare minimum, I guess. But at the same time, take the opportunity to look at bringing in some enhancements that members in the sector were looking for. So I'm not sure that Daniel might be taking Daniel's thunder from a bit later, but there was again a survey, and really the starting point to reviewing the model accounts was to look at the feedback from the sector and try and take on board that feedback. So as Daniel said, I'll work through this presentation. If there's any questions as we go along, feel free to put those in the chat, or there will be an opportunity for questions later on. Okay, so the first thing to note is that in terms of the model accounts, we have built in some hyperlinks for the guidance material. So in previous years, you will note that we had the guidance material in a separate document. What we've now done in the current year is actually incorporate that. It's not perfect, but you'll actually have hyperlinks on the left-hand side as we see there in the presentation. And if you click on those, they will take you through to the guidance material at the back of the document. So the guidance material, again, there's been some minor changes to it, really nothing of any significance, but it now sits within the model spreadsheet rather than the better practice guide. You'll see that there's a tab that talks about guidance. So, you can go straight to the guidance if you want, or you can click through from the relevant area in the model financial report, and again, click back. Now, one of the tips, of course, is when you are confirming your print ranges, to make sure that you keep the guidance tabs, the guidance hyperlinks out of the print range, and obviously the guidance material. As it's set up at the moment, it's not in the print range, but again, just be careful to make sure that we don't compromise that through the process. I touched on the balance checks being, sorry, no, I didn't. Sorry, balance checks. Again, we had a really pretty strong conversation about whether we should bring in balance checks and to aid the model accounts. We have. So what we've effectively done is we've built a range of formulas into the model accounts, and we've also put some balance checks in that will try and ensure that what's detailed in the notes is consistent with what's detailed in the primary statement. So you'll see that balance checks tab on the bottom of the model spreadsheet. If you go into that, there will be a series of, or there is a series of source and elements, and then what they link to. So for example, just working through, the first one there is the statement of comprehensive income. rates and charges. It should link and tie directly to note 3.1. And just, for illustrative purposes, we've made this one out of balance. So if the numbers, and there's a formula there in the red circle, if the numbers don't agree between the primary statement in this instance and the relevant note, you'll get that out of balance message. Really important to note that as people tailor the model for their own council's specific requirements, adding lines in, taking lines out, there is a very real risk that the formulas could become corrupted in this space. However, a corrupted formula should throw up an out of balance error as well. And again, really important to note that it's whilst we're trying to improve the integrity and improve the usability of the financial report, there is that care. I guess the risk is there'll be more, false positives in terms of out of balances than anything else. But again, it's a starting point. Goes through basically the primary statements, the balance sheet, and other parts. There's a couple of note comparatives where we've got information that should be the same in multiple parts of the financial statement. Okay. Formulas, again, another area of significant discussion. And look, I'll be honest, I probably landed on the side that we shouldn't put formulas in, but we have. I lost. So we've put a range of formulas in so that predominantly the primary financial statements will be populated by the information that we feed into the notes. Again, there is a risk here that if you're adding lines or information into the notes, that those formulas could become corrupted or may not pull through the right information. So the information, and we've got some qualifications in the guidance, but the information is provided on a all care but no responsibility basis, because really once the spreadsheet leaves our control, it is really up to you to ensure that those formulas and the integrity stays together. But again, both the formulas and the balance checks were based on the feedback we received from the sector. So, hopefully they are a help for users. Okay. Again, in terms of the guidance material, as I said, there's not a huge amount of change, but we've had some changes to the cover. It's obviously change in name for the department. We've had some changes to the printing instructions to reflect that, and again reiterate to make sure we're keeping the guidance out. That should work off the start point, but again, once things get changed, we're not in control anymore. Again, Daniel pointed this out a moment ago, but in terms of the current financial report, it does still refer to the Local Government Act 1989, the 2014 regs, rather than the new legislation. And again, that's part of that transitional process. So it hasn't changed. It's an important thing that has not changed. The statement of changes in equity. Again, we've included a line there for the impact of AASB 1059 service concession arrangements. We've also removed what was in there for leases and the like. So it's sort of simplified. We don't expect that there will be too many councils that will be having significant changes or having changes as a relation of 1059, but we have allowed for that. And we've also put some guidance in the significant accounting policies around 1059. I think in most instances, that's going to be a non-event for councils. I don't think we've got too many service concession arrangements out there. Okay. This was COVID-19 has been an area of significant discussion by the team. And really where we've landed is that each council is going to have to do their own work in this space, because it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all disclosure. What we've identified there is that, the significant impacts on council's financial operations, if any, are what needs to be disclosed. And we think really a good starting point for this is really if we go through our increases, decreases in terms of revenue and expenditure, any impacts on asset valuations. Again, when we look at note 2 in terms of the variations from budget, that's probably going to be or could be a bit of a lead indicator of what our COVID disclosures need to be. Probably important that the impact of COVID-19 in the financial report is only about the impact on the financial operations of councils. Now, obviously COVID-19 has had significant impacts on the community, and there may be, appropriate disclosures in the annual report in relation to, delivery of council programs and that might have been impacted. Additional support might have been provided. But in terms of the financial report, we're really looking for the significant financial impacts in relation to COVID-19. I'd probably encourage councils to look at preparing that note, at least in draft form, pre-30 June and working that through with your auditors to try and get that sort of covered off sooner rather than later. Okay. So AASB 16 leases and the disclosure, people remember, maybe sort of see it into their memories. The lease disclosure last year was quite comprehensive because we had to have the prior periods accounting policy, we had to have the change, and we had to have the new policy. So that detail has been removed, and we've now got the current ongoing accounting policy for leases, which is quite a simple one. So it's taken, best part of a page out of the annual report. Again, another area that was subject to quite a bit of discussion and came off the back of some suggestions from the sector was in relation to the plant and equipment movement table, was the model to provide a line for or provide for the accounting for prior period error. I would, if you do have prior period errors that you're proposing to run through this line, again, it's something that you need to be talking to your auditors early about. It is a little bit, prior period errors are a little bit more complicated and may not always be appropriately disclosed this way. So in certain circumstances, there could be a need to restate the prior balance sheet and have 3 balance sheets if the errors of such significance. But I think based on our experience and the feedback from the sector, this is the way that probably 95% of prior period errors have been disclosed in local government, and now the model does reflect that. But again, talk to your auditors early if you're looking at using that line. Change in accounting standards. There has been a significant reduction in the change in accounting standard note, and really we've brought that back to just acknowledge that there's a number of standards that are out there that are not yet mandatory. There's no new standards or interpretations that are issued that are expected to impact council. Now, we've had a look at the pending accounting standards, and we're very comfortable that that's for the bulk of councils, that's correct. But again, if you do think that there's an accounting standard, a specific pending standard or interpretation out there that's going to have an impact on council, on your council, that's something I guess that you need to check. But by and large, we don't see anything in the sector, in the pending accounting standards that's likely to have a material impact on council. So again, a little bit of a relaxation or an easing of the level of disclosure we've had in the previous few years with concession arrangements, and then prior to that, the leases and income and revenue standards, which have been a focus in this area previously. Superannuation disclosures, again, this is still a reasonably long note. It's been updated to reflect the latest available information from Vision Super. Again, That's relatively straightforward. It is obviously the disclosure of the entire fund rather than necessarily council, but it is, you know, consistent with what's been disclosed in previous years. Change in accounting policy. So this is again something that each council will need to highlight. It's highlighted in the model. This is something that each council will need to consider their own circumstances, and that's why it's in that yellow highlight. I'd take the bottom sentence really. We've got concession arrangements, definition of material, and references to the conceptual framework in there. We're not going to go through those in any detail in this session, but other than to say, I guess it's really not expected that any of these changes would have a significant impact on council. So use your judgment as to what level of disclosure you are making there. And look, you know, if unsure, you know, go and have a look at some 31 December 2021. Sorry, I'll get it right. 31 December 2020 financial reports, and have a look at what other entities in other sectors might be disclosing. But we would expect very little in there. The Better Practice Guide, and just briefly on this, so sorry, I'll flip over to the next slide. The big change is that the guidance material in the Better Practice Guide has now moved out of the Better Practice Guide, and it sits only in the model financial report. So the Better Practice Guide is a considerably smaller document this year than it has been previously. That said, it still does contain a number of really important bits of information that I think we all should be getting across as part of our our pre-season training in terms of preparing the financial report. There's guidance that again, Daniel sort of referred to this earlier on around the transitional provisions. That's been built into the Better Practice Guide. Again, it's pretty straightforward, and again, happy to take questions on that, but I'll let you guys work your way through that. Changes to the diagrams and in terms of the planning and reporting framework, just really bringing that up to the current framework. And what else have we got? Again, just really some changes to the introduction, some minor updates. We do acknowledge the working group, and actually I should pause and call out the working group members that or the team that worked on the model financial report. It really is the Finpro members that drive the change in this space. I think if Daniel and I had our way, we would have just photocopied last year's pretty much and moved on. But it is the working group, and it's the Finpro members that bring their thoughts to the table, and also acknowledge the work of the Auditor General in coming along and really, you know, making sure that we have our conversations about anything that could be problematic in the development of the model, rather than when you guys are out there preparing your financial report. I think that brings me to the end of my part of this presentation. So I will pause there, stop sharing my screen, and hand over to Hannah to talk through the 21-22 model budget.
Thanks, Martin. Let me just share my screen for everyone. Hoping you can all see that.
All good, Hannah.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Martin, and welcome everyone to the update on the model budget for 21-22. I'm going to talk through some of the key changes to the model budget and the Better Practice Guidance document as well. I led the working group responsible for updating the model budget this year, and I do want to thank all of those involved in the Finpro working group who gave considerable time and provided their expertise and knowledge to the process, so that's very much appreciated. So what are the key changes? So first up, we decided to add in some additional tabs to the model budget template, and these are all coloured in red and indicated as or indicated with optional. This came from some feedback from the working group, as well as some feedback provided from Finpro members when a survey went out, an LGV survey went out. It was around, what are some of the optional extras, that count to provide councils with that information, and a bit of a starting point that if they did want to include some more information for community benefit, where do they even start with that? So councils can use this at their discretion, whether they include or exclude these items from their budget document. These optional extras and optional tabs are a CFO or executive summary, the budget influences, and economic assumptions. The economic assumptions is really a 4-year view of what is proposed in the model financial plan. So taking information within the model financial plan and just making it for that 4-year budget period. So the CFO or executive summary allows for the inclusion of some budget commentary attributed to senior council officers. So providing a little bit more detail than what's contained within the Mayor and the CEO summary, and really just probably talking about trends and analysis of certain areas, and some examples have been provided within the better practice guidance within Appendix 1. By no means is this, if a council does want to go down the path of including a CFO or executive summary, by no means is that what you should include. It's more about this is some of the information you could include or you could consider in that. The budget influences tab allows for the optional disclosure of what are some of the key budget influences considered when developing the budget. Again, it's an optional thing, and some of the Appendix 2 provides some information as to what are some of the potential budget influences that a council may be facing or consider when developing their budget document. The economic assumptions tab allows for those optional disclosures on the key economic assumptions used in developing the budget. Again, as I just mentioned, it's 4 years of that 10-year view in the financial plan. By no means is this a comprehensive list. It's, a lot of what local councils or local governments would consider when developing their budget. And it helps, I guess, community members understand, what drives the numbers, what are the trends that are happening, and what can they expect over those 4 years as a, yeah. Okay. So getting into the rest of the document, so what are the legislative requirements? So section 1, we've updated that to reflect the integrated strategic planning and reporting framework terminology and the new graphs. We've provided the one that was done as part of the co-design process, but however, we've also included a supplementary diagram that could be used by council if you want to, which kind of breaks it down into a more user-friendly diagram for community members to decipher. So they're both in there. One's the preferred, and then one's optional for councils to use. Reference has also been made to the community engagement policy and the public transparency policy in there as well. So to, I guess, bring it all together as that integrated planning and reporting framework. Updates in section 2 of the Excel template. Basically, that's been done to better align that with the comprehensive income statement format and language. So using income and expenditure within the comprehensive income statement. So just drawing that through to section 2 as well to provide consistency in terminology. And then the surplus and deficit, including the way that the signs, so obviously, the brackets to show a deficit and surplus in positive figures. The change is aimed at making the language and the present it more consistent throughout the entire document and making it more accessible for our community. Section 2, that's just further on that, making flowing those differences, flowing those changes, down into the reconciliation in section 2.3. and referencing it as a surplus and deficit in brackets. Again, making it clearer for our community. Section 3.1 is now includes a 4-year summary of the planned human resource expenditure by EFT, employment type and gender. This is a requirement under the Local Government Planning and Reporting Regulations 2020. We've tried to keep it as simple as possible. However, some of the feedback that we have received was around how do you predict gender out for 4 years, and I'm going to leave that with each individual council to determine how they want to represent that information. Section 4, so this is another one of the optional tabs that we've included, basically allowing councils to provide those 4-year figures out if they want to. It was determined by the working group that it wasn't a requirement of the regulations of the Act to provide that data, those forward 4-year projections. However, if councils feel like that adds value to their communities, they surely can include that, and we've provided the template to make that easy for councils to do that. So this is the notes to the financial statements. Section 4.6 now includes a 4-year summary of planned capital works expenditure by expenditure type and funding source. So again, meeting the requirement of a 4-year budget and the regulations to stipulate that we need to provide that information out for 4 years. Year 1 still remaining at that detailed level, project level, with years 2 to 4 being at that asset class level. Section 5 is the KPI financial performance indicators and KPIs, and that's been updated to reflect the current legislative and regulatory references, and the references to the strategic resource plan has been removed from this. So any reference to strategic resource plan has been taken out of the better practice guidance and the model budget. The other change made to Section 5 was the addition of the sustainability capacity indicators as well, which is within the local government performance reporting framework. So just providing that consistency between, that reporting that we do at year end and then what we're presenting in our budget. Just provide that consistency for our communities. These are optional and by no means required. However, at the discretion of councils whether they include those key performance indicators or not. So Section 6 being the schedule of fees and charges, it now includes alternative text, introductory text. One of the things that we spoke about in the working group was publishing of statutory and non-statutory fees and the difference in what councils do there. And it would be really good to have that alternative text that if councils don't want to publish statutory fees, what could that introductory text be? And we've written that and provided that for councils as an option there. It also communicates that certain fees will be updated on the council website. So if you're not publishing your statutory fees, then that could be an option to publicise that on your council website after the stat fees are set. Okay, I am rushing through it, so I hope everyone's keeping track of all of that. So other changes include, so the updated references throughout the model budget to reflect, obviously, the new Local Government Act and the Planning and Reporting Regulations 2020. The language and terminology has been amended, so that includes the Integrated Strategic Planning and Reporting Framework, as well as removing the reference to annual budget, which has now been replaced with either annual budget process or just budget. Also, the removal of the strategic resource plan and that being replaced where applicable with the reference to the financial plan. So there's now a number of options for councils to include or not include within their budget document at their discretion. And as I mentioned earlier, all of those are flagged with red tabs or with red text. So have a look through those and determine what's going to work for your council, what you want to include, what you feel adds the value for your communities. The other updates is obviously reflecting the recent rate cap of 1.5% for 21-22 throughout the documents. We've rolled forward the budget years and removed the pending accounting standard text as well. And then provided those linkages between section 4 to the rating and revenue plan as well. Okay. Better practice guidance. So this is really just reiterating all of the changes that we made in the model budget Excel template and then how that flows through to the better practice guidance. Okay, so some of the cosmetic changes that were made was like the model accounts, the model budget, better practice guidance being updated to reflect the DJPR style and format following LGV's government change. Text and references with the introductory sections have been updated to reflect the requirements under the Local Government Act 2020 and the Local Government Planning and Reporting Regulation 2020. It's also been updated to reflect the change in language or the change to the Integrated Strategic and Reporting Framework, with the diagrams now reflective of that framework and have been included for that visual representation, the relationship between the various elements of the documents. So the model budget overview and guidance sections have been updated to reflect what the requirements are under the Local Government Act 2020 and the new regulations. This was a big chunk of work to do, making sure that all of the regulatory requirements now align into the Local Government Act and flow all the way through the documents. So this section makes reference to Department of Treasury finance indicators to ensure we're consistent with the rate cap projections and note the options of the financial performance indicators as well. Oh, that's it. Okay. I did rush through that. Apologies, everyone.
That's great. Thank you so much, Hannah. And thank you also to Martin, for both of you for your presentations today. And can I also add my thanks to both of you for the substantial amount of work that you've put into developing these documents this time around. I know that there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes, and certainly from a Local Government Victoria perspective, we definitely appreciate it. So thank you for your time and your expertise and knowledge today. We're tracking pretty well time-wise. So what I might quickly do is close out the presentation aspects of today. So bear with me for a second. All right. So just quickly before we move to the questions and finalise today, just wanted to give you a quick reminder of other upcoming events that may be of interest, particularly to this audience. So Finpro are running a session next Wednesday on budget preparation, and next Friday there is a webinar on the new 10-year financial plan. The following week there's a fraud awareness session on the Thursday, and finally another webinar covering the revenue and rating plan on Friday the 19th of March. So if any of those sessions are of interest to you, I would encourage you to check them out and register. If you are interested in attending and haven't registered yet, then please head to the Finpro website to register. And also, if you're a Finpro member, hopefully you've received all the communications from Gab regarding how to register for those as well. So yeah, just a bit of a plug for those upcoming sessions. If you are interested, please register and attend. All right, so that really concludes our formal presentations for today. So I do know that we've got some questions that have come through in the chat. So thank you to everyone who's posted those. What I might do is sorry, folks, Zoom is not my common platform that I'm used to using. All right, I think I've stopped sharing now. So if we jump into the chat, and we might try and start from the top. So first question from Augustine. Can we please get some clarification with regards to the treatment of unearned income in the model statements? At this stage, the model statements have a separate subnote, 5.3C unearned income, that is not going to the balance sheet. It might be worth considering for the 5.3C unearned income to be a specific line in the balance sheet, just like 5.3A and 5.3B have their own specific lines in the balance sheet. Thank you very much in advance. I might ask Martin if that's okay to have a go at responding to that one. Martin.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Augustine. Someone needs to give Augustine a box of chocolates because he's found the first little hole in our model, I think. We have added in the unearned 5.3C, I think, particularly to deal with the potential grants in advance. And it is not linking back to the balance sheet right now. So absolutely apologise for that, but thank you very much for identifying it very early on. I think, and I'm literally, we'll work with Daniel to just make sure we sort this out. But if it's immaterial, then I think the logic would be that it should roll in with 5.2. So we've got trust funds, deposits and other liabilities with one line item on the balance sheet, because they're likely to be pretty low and likely to be immaterial. If a particular council does have a material amount of unearned income for a given reason, then I think consideration of adding an additional line on the balance sheet would be reasonable. But I'll have a chat to Daniel offline and we'll make sure we sort that and get something out to this group.
Excellent, thank you, Martin, and hopefully that at least partially answers Augustine's question. That's really good. We'll certainly work on a response to that further as a result of this session. Moving along, so question from Robert. With section 2, are we required to report prior year actuals and forecasts for each service area, or is that optional? I can probably have a quick go at that. I think if effectively what we put in the model budget is what we sort of view as better practice, along with all the statutory and regulatory requirements. So if it's in there, we're probably saying, you know, better practice would be to put your prior year actuals and forecast. But off the top of my head, it might not be a specific legislative or regulatory requirement. I don't know if Hannah, you had any thoughts on that one at all?
I don't believe it's a regulatory requirement. However, it does provide context to the community as to what are we forecasting, or what was last year's actuals and where are we heading? What's the trend look like? I know that some councils do choose to put actuals versus and forecast and not choose forecast. I just think it's good practice to have it in there. Best practice. That's why it's in the model budget.
Great, thank you. So hopefully that responds to your query, Robert, and thank you for that question. So we've got one from Danny Wayne. Local Government Act 2020, Section 115 includes 3A. 3. Council must include any proposal to lease land in a financial year in the budget. Where ...
Sorry, Dan. I pressed enter when I should have kept writing. It's just a query
okay.
about whether that was a consideration about in the model budget about putting some sort of table in there, because the next part of Section 115 talks about that if you haven't put a proposal in the budget for a proposed lease, you've got to go out to community consultation as per your engagement policy. So it's about whether it's probably more to make people aware that if they actually include a table in their budget or some sort of mechanism in their budget document outlining all the leases they're proposing, you won't have to do separate consultation on those. I wonder if there's any. This only came up late for us. One of our, I think Maddox might have given us a presentation to someone, and one of our property people came up and asked the question of us.
Okay, thank you, Danny. So it's more of a sort of an awareness piece for others across the sector. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I was just wondering whether that came up in your conversations about the model budget prep or.
Oh, I will admit that that was probably something that slipped through the cracks for us. Wasn't really something that we were reviewing in detail, was around that section 115. I'm happy, obviously the documents have already been launched, but there might be an opportunity to add something into those documents to cover off on section 115.
That sounds good, Hannah. And I suppose I might just add, from our perspective, it's not always easy to cover everything, particularly when we're transitioning to new legislation. So it's really good to have these sessions. People sort of pick these aspects up so that we can improve and include those aspects where we need to. So if we do need to make an adjustment, we might take that one offline as well and have a look at what options we have in terms of adding that into to the model or some commentary around that. So thank you, Danny. Stephen, is your query along similar lines? It looks like the same section that Danny's referring to.
Yes, that was almost identical to what Danny had. I think our property team had the same catch up with Maddox, which probably raised the question in the same manner. So that's been answered. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that question. Okay. So Robert, previously we've included a statement of investment reserves within our financial statements. Is this statement no longer required? Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't think it's a requirement. Martin, can I maybe ask you about that one?
No, there's no requirement for a statement of investment reserves. I mean, obviously the reserves in the equity section of the balance sheet are disclosed. The model doesn't demonstrate a lot of reserves above and beyond, I think, the asset revaluation reserve, but there's no specific requirement. Again, whether councils are adding additional information in or not is up to them.
Great, thank you. So hopefully that answers that one for Robert. So thank you for that question. So I think Danny was just finishing off his earlier query there. The next one for you, the declaration of rates and charges legislated to include. I'm not entirely sure what you're getting at there, Fiona. Is
sorry, that's in relation to the budget document, the budget model. So at the moment we include a declaration of rates and charges statement. Just wondering if that is required.
So a declaration of rates and charges within the budget document itself?
Yes, yes.
look, again, off the top of my head, I should preface this. I'm not a legal expert. I'm not a lawyer. I think there is still a requirement to declare rates and charges. I'm not sure it has to be in the budget document itself. Hannah, maybe do you have any thoughts on that one?
The better practice guidance does mention that the regulations require certain information to be disclosed within the budget document, and then it goes through the sections of the Act as to what's required. So probably best to read through the section G11 in the better practice guidance, and that'll probably hopefully provide you the information that you're looking for there and what the links to the regulations are and the Act. That would be my suggestion.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Hannah, and thanks for the question, Fiona. So Gab's noted that all the upcoming PD sessions are listed on Finpro's website on the events tab, in case anyone's looking for those. All right, so Michael Fan, the options in the model budget are designed for this year only, transitional year, or are ongoing options for council? That's a good question. I suppose personal view, I think I'd like to see them stay in there as options for councils going forward. Hannah, do you have any views or comments on that one?
Yeah, it was really about options ongoing in your budget. I know the past 4 budgets that I've produced, I've continued to have the budget influences in there. So it's an optional thing. Councils don't have to include them, but I think that once you start providing that information to community, it's good to keep it in there for consistency. So I'm hoping, depends on who's in charge of reviewing the model budget next year, but I'm hoping that those optional things stay within the model budget.
Oh, hey, it's Michael here. 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 5, 6, whatever, you have the option to do 4 years or 1 year. So what's you guys' preference, is doing 4 years or just doing 1 year? So because really is it's inconsistent if a council, one of council choose 1 year, the other council choose 4 years. So
it's completely up to councils as to what they want to do in that space. The working group determined that it wasn't required under the regulations in the Act to provide 4 years on the statements to the financial, in the notes to the financial statements. However, some councils might want to provide that information for their community. So it will be very much a council to council decision. One thing that I'm probably looking at, which is another option we didn't include in the model budget, was there's a functionality within Excel called a sparkline that provides like a little bit of a graph trend over the 5 years instead of providing the numbers or no numbers at all. So it really just comes down to what individual councils will want to do in that space. I suggest though, if you do start providing 4 years of figures in your model budget or in your budget document, you'd probably continue that on. Providing more information 1 year and then less information might create a little bit of concern or, questions from the community. Why in that year did you provide more information and the next year less? Yeah. That's why we provided it as an optional for those councils that do want to go, and provide those 4 years. Here's the format that we suggest you use.
Thanks, Hannah, and thanks for the question, Michael. Hopefully that adequately covers your query. Stuart, I like that next comment. I do need to be careful. It's a photo of Newport Lakes Reserve, and it's a lovely place. I don't think there's crocodiles. I think there might be snakes there. So I will try and watch out, Stuart. Thank you. Sean Morley, has anyone reviewed the increase in long-term bond rates and the effect on annual leave and long service leave provisions? Excellent question. Martin, any thoughts in that space?
I haven't reviewed it, but any increase in the long-term bond rate, because you'll be increasing your discount factor, will result in an otherwise lower liability. Probably impact the long service leave more so than annual leave, but yeah, increase in the discount rate will reduce the liability. A decrease, so if the bond rates go down, that'll increase the liability.
Thank you. All right, so hopefully that answers your query, Sean. Let us know if there's anything further on that one. Tanya, if our council plan is not adopted until October, lists all our initiatives against council priorities objectives, what would be the minimum required on the listing of the initiatives in the budget? General, detail, 1 year or 4 years. This is currently fluid until the community vision and council plan has been adopted later. So I take it you're getting at the, I suppose, this timing in this transitional year where the budget's sort of going out earlier, but you potentially have until October with the community vision council planning documents. I take it that's what you're getting at, Tanya. Hannah, did you have any thoughts on this one?
I only from my own, from my council's experience, that we won't have a council plan with a new set of strategic objectives adopted by budget time either. So we're running with the previous council plan strategic objectives and only listing year 1 initiatives in section 2. So year 1 capital and operating initiatives in section 2. So I guess it comes down to where councils are at in their council plan and community vision process. As to how they interpret that and what they include in section 2. Hope that makes sense.
I think so, and thank you for that response, Tanya. Hopefully that answers your question. I think there is. I think Tony mentioned it at last week's professional development day. You know, there's an element of needing to apply common sense, I suppose, to how we approach this transitional period. There is this sort of some timing disparity between these documents this first time around, and it is going to cause some challenges along the way, there's no doubt. So look, hopefully that covers what your question is getting at, Tanya. Next question is from David Harrington. We had in our 2020-21 budget an amount to borrow for a specific project, but due to some delays, it is likely that we won't borrow the funds until the 21-22 financial year. Do we need to put the borrowings in the 21-22 budget, or can we effectively roll forward these borrowings as they were adopted in the 2020-21 budget, and the amount hasn't changed? Martin, are you still there?
I am still here.
Would you like to have a go at this one?
I don't feel suitably qualified from a legal or legislative perspective, but my thought would be, my initial thinking is that if you're planning to borrow and that doesn't happen in a given year, and you're still planning to borrow in the following year, even though it's the same amount, you'd still put that in your budget. But that's not a terribly informed view. It's just my thoughts at this stage. Hannah?
Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, I can add to that. There is a section within the statement of capital works. Hopefully you're borrowing for capital works and not operational requirements. So there is an option in there to basically put it in as carry forward. So projects carried forward, put your borrowings as your funding source, and therefore you've actually published that in your budget document. Other option as well is some councils don't. Some councils choose to put all of their carry forward projects in their Q1 finance report. It's probably not as, it's not really then published in your budget document that you still intend to borrow, but that's an option too, possibly. I think it's about maybe, as Daniel said, using that common sense around, what does the legislation say, and do you feel like you've met that legislation based on how you're treating that? My biggest suggestion would be put it in your carry forward capital works statement in the budget document.
Thank you so much, Hannah and Martin. Really appreciate you both being here to field some of these questions. It's really fantastic. And look, Tanya, thank you, or David, thank you for your question. Tanya, thank you for confirming that we've sort of responded to yours. I can't see any more questions in the chat at the moment. If anyone does want to add anything, I guess here's your chance if you would like to. Alternatively, if anyone has a burning desire to ask a question, feel free to jump off mute now. And if you want to ask a question, the opportunity is here if you would like to. The other alternative is I'll put up a slide in a second just with our contact details. So if there are further questions that you have subsequent to the session, feel free to contact either myself, Martin, or Hannah. I'll share our details shortly. So just having a last look in the chat box. Thank you, Gab. So the recording will be placed on our website early next week. So just if you did want to share with anyone that the session was recorded today, if they do want to have a look, it'll be available early next week. All right, look, I might just quickly finish by sharing my screen one last time. And jumping forward one slide. All right, so look, these are our contact details for myself, as I said, myself, Martin and Hannah. If you do have any further questions along the way, please feel free to get in contact with any one of us and we'll do our best to answer any queries. As mentioned, there will be a recording of today's webinar available shortly through Finpro, and don't forget the other upcoming events that are happening over the next couple of weeks because there's plenty on. A huge thank you to Finpro and Gabrielle in particular for managing the arrangements for today's session, and a big thank you to all the model accounts and model budget working group members for their efforts in putting these publications together. It is much appreciated. A huge personal thanks to Martin and Hannah for your participation and presenting in today's webinar. Really fantastic work, and thank you so much. And of course, thank you to everyone here for attending today's session, and good luck with preparing your budget and annual report for this year. So that's it from us. Enjoy the rest of your day and goodbye. Thanks all.